resign. Aljazeera.
More details are emerging of the new sanctions imposed by the European Union on Iran. For the first time, sanctions have been put on Iran's state oil and gas companies. There's also been a step up in restrictions against Iran's central bank. And a new person has been added to the list, member of the Supreme National Security Council and Energy Minister Majid Namjoon. Joining us from Dubai is Peter Middlebrook, Managing Director at Geopoliticity Inc. That's a consulting firm specialising in political and economic intelligence. And Mr. Middlebrook, if I can start off by asking you, what will be the impact of new sanctions on growth, employment, essential services?
Well, I think if you only have to look back, for example, the 10-year sanctions on Iraq, which have a devastating impact on the economy, and for example, in that particular context, led to a reduction in per capita spending on education from $525 down to $25. The tightening of sanctions to bring the Iranian government back to the negotiating table, I think really reflects a kind of view that the sanctions, the very sanctions which have been applied before, have been less effective. There were various workarounds, but these sanctions really do hit right at the heart of government. They hit not just the Ministry of Petroleum, but also the national oil and gas producers as well as many other companies, including freezing their assets in Europe. So this is really a very strong tightening of sanctions. And if the sanctions are long-term, even though there may be some degree of adaptation within the economy, one would imagine it will hit growth, absolutely. It's already been revised down. It will therefore hit revenues and will start to hit services and essential and the basic services that people have access to.
Mr. Middlebrook, why have these specific companies been targeted?
Well, I guess if you look back over the course of the last 5 to 6 months, there's a perception that the sanctions which were put in place had workarounds, and many of these companies have still continued to operate. So the sanctions weren't effective, and clearly this kind of regulation 945 goes further and tries to cut off these companies their ability to be involved directly in exporting oil and, of course, also transporting it too. So it goes right to the heart of the growth of the Iranian economy, which has something like around 90% of its gross domestic product really comes from the oil economy. So the impact, again, will propound that the sanctions themselves, if they are effective, again, will have a direct impact on the economy, on employment, and also on the capital and current accounts as well.
Just lastly, the restrictions on the central bank, are these going to hurt the average Iranian more than Iran's supposed nuclear program?
I think if you see sanctions as a way to bring in the Iranian government back to the negotiating table around the nuclear issues, it could conceivably do that. I think it will effectively hurt people. Certainly in the long term, that's precisely what sanctions do. In terms of impact on the capital and current account, trade balance, the ability for private companies to engage in the region, yes, this will be it. But there's a wider impact too. When we, for example, the UAE, and as a key kind of trading partner as well, about 8% of gross domestic product also comes from its trading relations with Iran. So it will affect the regional economy, and I think creating a sense that going back to the negotiating table, of course, is absolutely the direct route that the government needs to take.
That's Mr. Peter Middlebrook joining us from Dubai. Thank you very much. Moving on to the crisis in Syria, and activists say there's been shelling in several neighbourhoods.